What is the dumbest thing you've ever done in order to be near someone you had a crush on? Okay, here's a fun one. When I was a freshman in college, I was planning to head up to a friend in another college a few hours away to visit for a day. Let's call him Steve for the story. Then I found out there was going to be a dorm party in my school that same Saturday, and that my crush would be there. Let's call her Mary. I was pretty socially awkward and didn't get invited to many of these affairs, so I decided I would cancel my trip and go to the party so I could be near her. Then the day before the party, or my canceled trip, Mary goes, "Hey, I heard you're going out of town tomorrow. Can I hitch a ride? I want to go visit a friend up at the same school." Now, suddenly, I need to scramble to uncancel with Steve at this other school. Problem is, I can't get a hold of him. Cell phones were just starting to become mandatory. Steve didn't have one yet. Okay, so now I'm driving my crush to another school where I claim I plan to meet a friend who I've actually canceled on. When I get up there, I still can't get a hold of Steve. So my crush and her friend, who we should just call John, invite me to hang out. I never get in contact with Steve despite calling frantically several times throughout the night. Why did I want to leave Mary and John? Because the friend she was visiting was actually some dude she was trying to bang. So in the end, with nowhere else to go, I was planning to sleep in my car and just lie about it, so that I could get the hell out of this increasingly awkward situation. But failed. They invited me to stay on the couch where I stupidly spent the night, clearly able to hear them having intimacy. In the end, I learned many, many valuable life lessons that weekend. Also too, I probably didn't learn some that I should have, but whatever. It was a while ago now. The irony, if he had told her that he canceled his trip, she might not have had a ride to meet her dude. Would have gone to the party with him and y'all would have ended up together. Best case scenario. Story 2. It was 11th grade and this beautifully alien-looking boy named Hank was in one of my classes. He actually looked like Spock, with eyebrows pointing up towards his scalp. I think I was mostly attracted to his muscles and a simple masculine name. Being in 11th grade and never having done anything remotely athletic throughout the course of my high school career, I decided to join the track team. Hank just happened to be on the team and was rather obsessed with hurdles. So obsessed, in fact, that the only thing he would talk about when I nervously engaged in conversation with him was his love for hurdles. So interesting. I did not care, for his abs and Vulcan facade made me turned on. Joining the track team sure got me a lot of time with Hank. Viewing him from afar was enough. Since he was so dim-witted I didn't actually want to date him. That would have been embarrassing, because everyone knew how Hank was not the sharpest tool in the haystack. Whatever. Also, the fact that he was younger than me didn't help. My friends would never have let it go. I'm possibly the least athletic person I've ever met in my life. Joining the track team was like a snail trying to join a pack of cheetahs. A snail whose ankles swell up from the simple act of lightly jogging. And choosing hurdles was like a snail trying to join a pack of hurdling cheetahs. Not good. One fateful day when both of my parents happened to be out of town, the inevitable happened. I was failing on hurdles, as per usual. Hank did not notice, for he was too intent in practicing his hurdling form. My foot got caught in the last hurdle, and to my horror, I found myself falling. I heard a small fracture, and immense pain went through my body. A stream of foul words poured out of my mouth as I clutched my aching arm. Hank looked on, jaw slack with his usual dimness. Everyone said my arm was not broken, but I knew better. I had to have a neighbor take me to the doctor to get an x-ray. It was broken, all because of my infatuation with a hurdler named Hank. Story 3. I purposefully was late to science class every day for almost a year for the opportunity to wave at the guy I liked. I didn't even know his name, just called him Random Wave Guy, RWG, because he waved at me once for no particular reason, and that was the extent of our socialization. I also spent around 15 minutes each morning making excuses so I could be by the doorway when he walked past his classroom, so I could get a half-second glimpse. Also, when I found out he was the younger brother of one of my bros, I gasped from the wrong sensation and the fact that every time my friend had been talking about his younger sibling, it had been him. Later, they moved into a house in the same street I lived on, and the guy started riding my bus. Turns out he was really funny, not just insanely attractive. However, a lot of the kids in the bus had this intense loathing of him for the perceived notion that he was not straight. He made a lot of self-disapproving non-straight jokes. Though it was perfectly straight, I basically made myself the enemy of the entire bus by sticking up for him. Me and my best friend were the only people he could sit by. Long story short, I did a lot for him and made it very clear I liked him and accepted every invitation from his older brother to his house to be closer to him. Talked to him a lot, but he ended up going out with my best friend who said she didn't like him but apparently did. What kind of best friend does this? Story 4. When my high school English teacher was young and adventurous, He dropped out of college and moved from Connecticut to California to chase after a dame. When it didn't work out, he and his roommate naturally decided to spend most of their remaining money in a pair of monkeys. I kid you not, to walk around town with. The monkeys turned out not to be the friendliest of creatures and settled mainly in the windowsill above the balcony in their apartment. So he ended up living with a couple of occasionally troublesome monkeys for a few months. It wasn't too bad at first, but their mess became a bit of a problem. At one point, his roommate's parents decided to visit, and luckily enough, the pesky primates were taking an afternoon nap. They almost got away with hiding the situation entirely. They blamed the smell on the sewage leak, I believe, but one of the monkeys stirred from its slumber and made its presence known with an empathic tantrum directed at what it believed were intruders. So he and his roommate were forced to get their mess together and move out. But first, they had to clean out all the feces from the living quarters. They tried the old wash it out with water method with the help of 2 garden hoses, but only to minimal success. Eventually, the burden on the kitchen floor of their second-floor apartment became too great, and a sizable place turned into a gaping fissure through which an unholy slosh of water and mess poured into the room directly below. At that point, the landlord saw the extent of how much they'd done goofed, and told them to scram after handing them a generously low bill for the repairs. He ended up getting a degree from NYU and retiring this year. He always has the most interesting stories to tell. Story 5. Oh God. This thread brought back a lot of repressed memories. Okay. High school. Freshman year. There's this girl I really like called Emily. She just moved here from Nevada, and she's really shy. We start hanging out a lot and flirting towards the end of the year. One day in June after school, we're just hanging out on one of the benches near the basketball courts. A few people I know are playing basketball, and for some reason I do not know to this day, I decided that I might impress her with my basketball skills. That's right. I legitimately thought that she'd instantly fall for me as soon as she saw how good I was at basketball. An extremely stupid decision on my part, mainly because I sucked at basketball, and most of these other people were on the basketball team and were much better than me. Brushing aside all risk, I boldly walk up to the court and join in the game. Immediately, I realized that I'm probably going to make a complete laughingstock and be ridiculed. I'm also new to the school, and one of the other guys, Nathan, was rather competitive. To my surprise, I actually do quite well, and most of the ridicule is directed to another kid by the name of Jake. Jake is also a freshman, and he's been pestered for most of the beginning of the year, especially by Nathan and company. He'd recently started hanging around us again, being slightly more popular now than he was at the beginning of the year. During the game, Jake was the target of the occasional joke or insult from Nathan. Usually he'd just chuckle and mumble a couple of words. About half an hour later, Jake misses a couple shots and Nathan starts taunting him. "What's wrong, Jake? You seem kinda out of it today. Did your girlfriend break up with you or something?" Oh wait. This time, however, Jake just looked up and stared at him for a good 10 seconds. Then, out of nowhere, he pulls out a sharp object from his jacket pocket and starts yelling incomprehensible stuff. Nathan and everyone else are shouting at him to put the sharp object away. Emily's screaming, etc. Eventually, the police are called and Jake is taken away, but they release him the next day. I didn't see much of those people again. I ended up dating Emily for a couple months before realizing she was just really immature. I didn't see Nathan again. I didn't see Jake either. From what I heard, his parents got scared after the incident and sent him to live with some distant relatives in a suburb of Los Angeles. It's like the Fresh Prince intro, except in the wrong state and the one making trouble in the neighborhood gets sent away. Story 6. This will probably get buried, but what the hell. I went in front of a whole church and sang in a trio with a girl I liked. Oh God, why? I swear I was in love with this girl. I still might be 3 years later. 3 things. I have the most awkward voice ever. I know everyone is self-conscious about their voice, but even other people tell me it sounds funny and awkward. My whole being is awkward. My posture, my lanky height, everything. I can only imagine how I look in front of a whole church. I've been a regular to church before, but where I went, it was small. Her church was the big bacon of churches. Lots of people were at the service that day, including people I knew from school. But I thought it would be all worth it. So we practiced for about 2 hours before the service. God knows why that long. Right before the service, she started to talk about hoping to go to prom. Whoa, mama, was the only thing going through my naive mind. She could only be hinting to me. Why else would she be bringing this up now? She knew I was in love with her. Then she starts talking about how she hopes a senior boy named Sam, not my name, asks her. I spent 2 hours practicing a stupid song when I'm not even close to being an adequate singer, and how I have to make a fool of myself in front of a crowd filled with people I go to school with. I finished the song with style, waited an hour for the service to finish while sitting next to her, and got myself out of there. Never again. Story 7. This will get buried, but oh well. In college, I had a crush on a woman in my program. We worked in the same group for one of our courses and were in the same program. And as the semester rolled on, she started saying things like, "I'm taking this course, you should take it too." Massaging my shoulders, lots of touchy-feely behavior in class, the whole 9 yards. My friends were yelling at me that she had a crush on me too. I was a wicked socially awkward penguin back then. I was too scared to do anything about it. Winter break comes and the next semester comes. I signed up for a few classes we would share, mostly because, well, I had a crush on her. But given the program, there was a huge probability we'd be together. The month comes and she seems distant. I decide, well, might as well do something awesome for Valentine's Day. My friends and a few close fellow classmates were all for my idea. I bought a small bouquet of flowers, a card, and wrote a nice and quick poem. I had a few people read it prior to giving it to her and got the thumbs up. God knows I didn't want to be creepy. Oh, looking back on it now. The first class comes and during break I place everything at her seat while she's away. My classmates waited in bated breath. I waited nervously. Hands sweating, pulse quickening. She reads the card, reads the poem, and puts it all away. I hang my head in disgrace. My classmates could feel my shame. Even my professors felt sorry for me. Our next class comes. She says nothing. Where she normally talks to me, she says nothing to me. My friends who were also in the previous class were at this point trying to pump up my confidence. I barely concentrated in class. I stared at the time, just wanting the day to end. I end up going home feeling ashamed and disgraced. I feel the lowest of the low. When I got home, there was an email sitting in my inbox from her. She had my number and not email. Kind of weird. She agreed to a date. Woot! Felt awesome. We planned for it in a few days. Things go on as normal. The day of the date comes, and as soon as I'm about to leave for class, I get a text. "I've got some stuff with my family. Can we push it to tomorrow?" I say sure. No biggie. Next day comes, I get another text. "I forgot I have something planned. Can we push it to next week?" I look at it weirdly, but say okay. Yeah. A week later, she tried to postpone that date too. Come to find out, she ended up not wanting to go out, but didn't want to hurt me. Had I asked her out the previous semester, she would have said yes and we would have gone out. Story 8. I spied a cute guy in the back of my political science class who was always by himself. I decided to semi-stalk him and see if I couldn't get to know him better. Turns out he wore a couple of World of Warcraft shirts, so I thought to myself, well, I play that fairly often. Maybe if I get some, he'll notice me. Yes, you read that right. I bought World of Warcraft t-shirts just for that purpose. So lo and behold, that Friday he noticed me outside the testing center when I was wearing my Hellscream Warchief shirt and decided to talk to me after school the following Monday. We ended up getting sunburned by talking too long in the parking lot, and I did get to jump him pretty soon, and still do get to jump him as often as I want. Story 9. This really isn't dumb, but when I was a teenager, I was selling bottled water at my family Sanda gym in northern China. It was summer vacay, so I'd always be there at 5 or 6 a.m. every day. That's when all the Sanda people came to do their morning run with the local army station there. Anyways, there was a new guy that came about a week before. I caught a glimpse of him a few times and thought he was pretty cute. Their gym is upstairs from where I sell bottled water. I taught aerobic dancing to older ladies then. One morning he showed up for the morning run. Now it's a really tough run. They literally run all the way around the perimeter of the city. It's over 20 kilometers. Most of the kids just walk most of it if they come, and only their captain makes it till the end. So I'm out in front of the gym, stretching at 6, and I hear the army soldiers yelling their marching chant and jogging past. Following behind them, I see the captain. And who do I see jogging alongside? New guy. His face was completely red like a tomato, and I just said, "Oh, you're really good." He replies, "Yeah, thanks," and walks inside. Anyways, it turns out his family lives in Canada and he's back for the summer visiting his grandparents. In his off time, he plays with other people in the gym, so I pretended to like to go and ask them questions when they play. He never really paid much attention to me. Then, one day, about a week later, he comes downstairs after the training session and buys all the water I have. Goes back upstairs and comes back down all cleaned up. Then he hands me a book on how to play a Go. It was just too sweet. Anyways, we go for ice cream later and talk. It turns out he was leaving in a week to Canada. I felt really sad because I really liked this boy. We walked about and it was drizzling a little bit. This was at 9 p.m., so it was pretty dark. My mom wants to know where I am, so I tell her I'm coming home. He hears it and offers to walk me back. He grabs a Hello Kitty umbrella from a street vendor and we walk. The umbrella is honestly tiny, so he held it over my head. It was so sweet. So I grab onto his arm and pull close to him and walk. The end result? We were both soaked when it was close to my house. Anyways, I gave him my first kiss. A week later, he was gone. On the day he left, I was sitting at my desk selling bottled water before the aerobic ladies came, feeling really dejected. He walks in through the door with a big bag full of gifts he got for me. He gave me a hug and kiss, whispered in my ear and left as soon as he came. I look out from a second-floor window and see his cab was waiting with his mom inside. She didn't know about the impromptu stop. I guess this will always be a secret. That was the last time I saw him. I regret nothing. Story 10. I had to create a throwaway for this one. I'd been texting my crush and we had talked about meeting up at a party that night. Felt like the greatest thing in my life. When my phone turned off. I started using my friend's phone. She had his number in her contacts, and he stopped responding. I caught a glimpse of him when my friends and I were walking from a party later that night. I waved enthusiastically and he waved as he was walking into a house party. I then had the bright idea of following him into the house and asking him if he wanted to come to another party with me. He was hanging out with a few friends, 2 of them female, to my jealousy at the time. I was obviously feeling awkward about the situation. I recognized his reluctance and immediately dashed off without saying anything, too embarrassed. Oh, and did I mention that I'd hung out with him the night before and took 2 straight doubles of Sailor Jerry to catch up with him? Only to throw it up as he rushed me to his dorm hall's bathroom. Good times. Story 11. This is the craziest thing I ever did. I was absolutely in love with my high school sweetheart. And in grade 11, our last summer together before she moved across the country, I had signed up as a tour guide for canoe trips to young kids up north. 6 hours away, and I only got 1 week off the whole summer. I went up for training and immediately regretted it. The kids were annoying rich brats, and I couldn't bear to be away from my then girlfriend, knowing this was our last summer together. There was no way I could get out of this job as I had made a commitment. So after the training, I had a few days back home before I was gone for the whole summer. I took my bike out and rode to a small hospital and called my dad, saying I had a bike accident and was at the hospital. Could he please pick me up? I faked pain and got the nurse to wrap my wrist up. My dad wanted proof that it was in fact broken and not sprained. We need to take you in to get an x-ray, he says. I said let's go to the hospital tomorrow and see how it feels in the morning. It might just be a sprain. I proceeded to go downstairs to my gym and drop a bench press bar loaded with weights on my wrist. Now I'm in excruciating pain but slept through it. Went to the hospital the next morning and the x-rays came back broken. Got out of the summer job, had a great summer with a girlfriend, and then she cheated on me. Story 12. I guess you could say my whole friendship with her was a string of me doing stupid stuff just so I could be near her. For about 2 years, I walked her home, even though I lived on the other side of town, and I complimented her constantly. I asked her out to a grade 9 grad. She turned me down even though she had told me she liked me. A few years later, she told me that she had lied to me about that because she just liked the attention I gave her. Similar to the OP, in grade 11, I started going to church. She's very religious, even though I considered myself to be atheist. I convinced myself that religion was for me. For a couple of months, kept on going to church and reading the Bible. Even went to youth conferences and such. Then she met another guy and they started dating. Seems like my faith left pretty quick after that. To all of you who say I kept myself in the friend zone because I didn't say anything, I told her how I felt several times and I was turned down plenty of times. Throughout all of this, we remained really close friends. And to me, she was my closest friend I've ever had. So I recently asked her to stop talking about her new boyfriend, and it seems like that was too much for her because she gave up on her friendship. And now I even lost her friendship. I've done a lot of crazy things for her for the past 4 years. Turns out 4 years of treating her like a princess isn't enough for her. So now I lost the girl I love the most. Sorry for moping, Reddit. Just needed to share that. Okay. Anyways, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 13. A guy I had a major thing for found out I wasn't allergic to and I thought I was for years, and immediately declared that he will, indeed, be the first person to get me stuffed. Now I wasn't straight edge by any means, but I also didn't find the idea of mind-altering substances too exciting. However, the dream of the last few months had just told me he was going to lower both of our inhibitions while in the same room. I gave the spoken English equivalent of a and followed him into his dorm room. The next 2 months were a bit of a haze. I had finished my temp night job and was between semesters in my school, so free time was aplenty, and free time was his. At first, he'd just show me strain after strain, laughing as I coughed and wheezed my lungs out. I'd end up in his room immediately after he woke up, and leave only when he was going to bed. We'd spend stupid amounts of time making characters in whatever Soul Calibur was the latest at the time. order pasta bread bowls from Domino's just about every day, and I swear he noticed just how much I'd end up staring at him. Flash forward to New Year's Eve. I brought along to a party with a crush, his dealer's girlfriend, and a group of people I'd never seen before. I ended up befriending a girl in a wheelchair. She was so nice and everyone was ignoring her, while the guy I was crazy for sat a cute little Asian girl on his lap. Frick me, right? Eventually, push came to shove. I got really close to sealing at least a partial deal with the guy, and then he threw me at his other best non-straight friend, who I ended up sleeping with or pseudo-dating or God knows what in the continued induced haze. At some point, I realized what really happened. In the middle of it with a second guy, to be completely honest, and ended the situation as swiftly as I could. I'm still friends with the guy who smoked me out for a period of time, and he still flirts with me because he knows what it does to me. I think he has a girlfriend now, though. I'm not too sure. Story 14. Probably will get buried, and definitely not as bad as some of these. In freshman year of high school, my family had just moved to a new city. Therefore, new school. I saw this girl who sat next to me in bio, and my first thoughts were literally, she's hot, I'm going to date her one day. Well, we talked every now and then, but then we got new seats. She was one of the only people I talked to in class, so I went by her desk whenever we had any free time, asking for help. Now, I really do hate biology, but it's not to an extent that I was failing or anything. Before every single test, or maybe even every other class, I went by her desk for help. Sometimes, most times, she was confused about the material. She has ADHD, and so would tell me the wrong things. Not on purpose, she thought it was correct. Then I would always be surprised at how every single test I got higher grades than her. I normally always get a B+-ish, or around a B-ish. We started dating in late 10th grade, and I told her that I used to go ask for help just to talk to her. She was like, wow, you could have at least corrected me. That way I may have done better. We're still dating, entering freshman year of college. Story 15. It's early sophomore year of college, and I fancied the cute female friend of a friend who seemed interested in me as well. We'd hung out a few times, and she had invited me to visit her family's house upstate to celebrate Labor Day. It's the Friday before Labor Day. I turned 19 that weekend as well, just had my last class and was walking back to the dorm feeling pretty good about the fall 2001 semester so far. I walk across a bridge or walkway in the middle of campus and see my friend and my potential special lady chatting at the base of the Humanities building. Between them and me is the railing of the walkway. A small drop, 10 feet of landscaping, a moderate-sized hedgerow, 4 feet tall by 2 feet wide, and some sidewalk. I decide that it is well within my capability to hop the fence, generate some speed, jump a hedge that is taller than an Olympic hurdle, land triumphantly next to them, and run up the score on my coolness points with a girl I like. My friend made terrified eye contact with me during my sprint to the hedge, and not surprisingly, my feet didn't even clear midway through the hedge. The rest of me landed slightly more softly and skidded to a stop. I had scrapes and bruises in both palms, elbows, and knees. My friend, who was looking at me wide-eyed, yelped, "Why did you just do that?" I hopped up, trying to salvage what was left of my dignity, and quickly determined that in addition to their fair amount of wounds, the left knee was quickly swelling. I finally turned to her friend who had been staring at me so far, winced to say hi, and she took one look and said, "Gotta get to class." My friend also had to leave, and so she made sure I could at least get back to the dorm before shaking her head at my stupidity and running off. I hobbled back to the dorm, whereupon my roommate and a couple of our friends found me trying to clean myself up in her tiny dorm sink. My roommate helped me hobble down to the student health center for actual medical care. I encountered a few other friends that wondered who I'd been fighting with. To my longtime best friend who saw me in this walk of shame, I bellowed, "I hurt myself," in a sing-songy voice from what we assumed was the combined frustration and bemusement in my own foibles. The good news, nothing serious happened to me. The bad news, instead of the previous scheduled plans I had to spend my birthday weekend in bed, swapping out frozen cans of lemonade onto my left knee while friends came through to behold the physical evidence of my insane maneuver. The girl and I chatted a bit more for the next couple weeks, but by the time I made my move, she had already been with some weird person who she made friends with while participating in the marching band. College. I had no concept of how to start relationships with the girls I liked in high school or college. Luckily, I put it together later in life and got married to my best friend 2 weeks ago. Congratulations, man. Story 16. I once had the biggest crush on a girl in high school. We're talking years in the making. We were even friendly, occasionally chatting a little. Q1 year, our school is having a date auction for charity where girls volunteer to go to lunch with the winner to raise money for said charity. I have 2 part-time jobs, both at minimum wage. I'm prepared to go to war for my love. Love is in quotes because it was infatuation. Teenagers are dumb. It's Friday and the date is next Tuesday. After a protracted bidding war, I won a date with my crush. I ended up paying the highest price at auction for my date. Came Monday, I was massively sick. Couldn't move from the couch. I woke up Wednesday. When I realized what day it was, I panicked and asked about my date. Apparently, my brother stepped in and went to lunch with her. I was secretly pretty angry, even though he didn't do anything. I responded by stealing his crush in our shared Spanish class 2 years later. Mature? Nope. No hurt feelings, though. The girl's family turned out to be devout Jehovah's Witnesses, so she wasn't allowed to date non-ho-hos. A terrible term for them. I ended up marrying a smoking hot girl I have a ton in common with later in life. No regrets. Story 17. A girl who had a crush on me, totally oblivious at the time, changed 3 of her classes 1 year to be in mine. That summer she kept working on a Spider-Man drawing, my favorite superhero, that she handed to me along with 3 Spider-Man action figures that she bought in Toronto. We go to school south of Seattle. On the first day back to school, I simply said thank you, took the gifts, and went on my way completely ignorant to the gesture. It came to a stop after homecoming when I asked no one to go to it that year. Whole time I never read anything into her constant presence. The gifts or the paragraph-long yearbook messages I got 2 years in a row until a whole year after high school and I found the picture. Contacted some acquaintances between us from high school who made it clear just how much of an idiot I was. Called the number in my yearbook, only girl number in the yearbooks, but it was disconnected. Tried to find her through MySpace at the time, but no dice. Then Facebook, not there. Google search, nothing. She had a hyphenated last name, so it was difficult to figure what she went by. I guess none, she didn't get on the social networking bandwagons. Gave up hope of ever reconnecting with her last year. I'm sorry I was stupid, Danielle. I would have loved to have known what our relationship could have been back then. I was a schmuck for never noticing. Didn't think anyone could ever have a crush on me. Story 18. Back in high school, the Honor Society, which I was a member of, did a matchmaking thing around Valentine's Day. The idea was everyone in the school fills out a Scantron personality questionnaire. Some company takes them and delivers back a sheet for everyone stating who you match well with, along with a bunch of other crap like random facts about your birthday. Well, I had neglected to do one until some other Honor Society members approached me and told me to do one now as they are collecting them. I agree to do one. We all pull up a chair at the library table. It doesn't take long for a few other people to come over and start chatting with them, giving me a chance to peek at recently collected Scantrons. Sure enough, the girl I passionately agonized over for years, my close friend that I dreaded to tell my feelings to, had her submission in the pile. I surreptitiously dragged her Scantron from the pile, just enough to bring her answers in view and made sure to align some extra answers. It worked a little too well. I had forgotten about my specious act when the honor sponsor came running up to me exclaiming, "Oh, Frances, you and Crush got the highest compatibility score." This was a true statement, which should have included a little emphasis. By far the highest score. We were reported as 98% compatible. I didn't change that many answers, but I hadn't considered how these things were weighed. This was a surprise. The other surprise was that in addition to everyone's personal top 10 being printed on their result sheet, the top 10 couples in the school were posted everywhere. We beat the second most compatible couple by a full 40%. Whoops. Story 19. I have a few of these stories, but by far, the dumbest thing I've done to be near someone was pour my heart out to someone while being in the friend zone. She was going through a tough time, and I felt she was purposely vague in her feelings about me, and so I decided to hang around her a ton, because we had a lot of free time and had an intense crush on her. She's very intelligent when it comes to her coursework at school, and she works hard to get good grades. She doesn't work as hard at her personal life, though, and falls for every tattooed hunk she can find, makes a mistake with him, and proceeds to cry on my shoulder about the whole ordeal. More than once. I poured my heart out to her. We talked for hours about her stupid man problems and emotional mistreatment. I gave her my best advice because she constantly asked for it. I watched her make bad decisions after bad decision, which really tore me up inside because I had a crush on her. But I also genuinely wanted her to be a happy, whole person and not broken. She never listened to what I had to say, and I would occasionally just stop talking to her altogether because I took what she was doing to herself personally. I don't talk to her much these days. The final straw was when she started contacting exes again for their opinion of her and their relationship. She's found less exasperated shoulders to soil. Never could burst that bubble she lives in. Story 20. During the latter half of my junior year of high school, I spent most days at my best friend's house. To get there, I was required to cross the street in front of my school. I did get this fairly often, every day, but one day was different. As the little white fellow filled the crosslight box, I began to walk, and from across the street I heard, "Hey Sausalito, hurry up." I looked to my left and see what I considered to be the most stunning woman in the world. From then on, I knew her name. Sausalito. Yes, Sausalito. A sophomore, apparently. I'd seen her on occasion, passing between classes, and I should say that those were the best moments of my school day. Though she wouldn't spare a passing glance, it was amazing just to know that I was within 4 feet of her. During the first semester of my senior year, I began to hang out with a friend of mine. His name was Steve or something. He was in journalism, as was Sausalito. It just so happened that he had a crush on her. I let slip my knowledge of her name, but of course she didn't know me. She didn't know that I knew her name. She was one of those people whose name you only knew if you talked to them, so for all intents and purposes, it was weird that I knew her name. It was creepy. I should note, however, that they didn't know that I had a thing for her. The next day, Steve comes by with a copy of the school paper. Now, I need to make clear that my school's paper was one of the most atrocious things I'd ever read. The journalists must have suffered incontinence of the mouth. However, I noticed Sausalito's name. It was a holiday article. Some horse-drawn hayride, if I recall correctly. Of course, that didn't matter to me. What did matter was that it was well written. That was a straw that ripped the camel in twain. I decided that she was too good to let slip by. Now, I was fairly ahead in high school. I had an excess of units, which would have allowed me 3 free periods. Out of a 6-period day, I could have left school at 11 a.m. But I figured the only thing that I would do with the extra few hours at home was watch television. Yes, there's nothing wrong with that, but when weighed against love, I joined journalism in order to get closer to her. The lengths at which I went to do so seemed creepy, in retrospect. I feel incredibly out of place in journalism. I was a great writer. Maybe I still am, you tell me. So that wasn't a problem. The issue was that I was part of this thing that everyone else had spent years devoting their time to. I was writing front-page articles, but I spared my work with no passion. This made for an incredibly awkward semester. That is, until Pokemon Soul Silver and Heart Gold came out. Those Pokewalkers were a godsend. For some strange reason, everyone in our journalism class played Pokemon. Everyone. Following the release, the first 10 minutes of every class was spent interfacing our Pokewalkers. Connecting my Pokewalker with hers was just as blissful as passing her in the hallways. On a side note, that's also when I realized that these people didn't really give 2 cares about the paper. They just played Pokemon. Well, Pokemon HG and SS had this game that replaced the gambling found in the original Gold and Silver due to some legal issues somewhere. Voltorb Flip. I wasn't a fan, but I noticed that Sausalito loved it. When all of her other classmates had passed that area, she just stopped and played Voltorb Flip. I had already been in the game, so I decided to try and impress her. Yes, with Voltorb Flip. I cringe when I look back on it. Needless to say, I got good. I got good as hell. I maxed out my points in a matter of days. She glanced at my screen and took notice. Congratulations to me. We had a small chat over MySpace regarding all the glorious points I had. I offered to buy her something from the store in the Voltorb Flip parlor, which I would then trade to her by letting a Pokemon hold it. Smooth as can be. Nothing ever came of that, though. Sometimes the journalism class would have potlucks. During one, I baked a batch of marvelous cupcakes in order to impress her. I mean, seriously, who in the world doesn't like cupcakes? Everyone in the class loved them. She had nothing to say. That was disappointing, and a waste of resources. The remainder of senior year followed, and I always failed to talk to her. I was terrified. It was ridiculous, because I had never been so terrified of anything. I wasn't much of a people person, and I didn't give 2 cares about relationships, but she changed that. Talking to her just seemed like such a daunting task. As my graduation approached, I got nervous. After this, I'd never had a chance. I could always talk to her after graduation, but I'd never have a reason to see her. No passing periods, no Pokewalkers. I got nervous. Now the final week of school was optional for seniors. Not officially, but none of the teachers gave any care if the seniors showed up. Maybe they were tired of seeing our faces and listening to our stories, or maybe they were genuinely nice people. I'll never know. It doesn't matter, does it? It's hardly relevant, so stop wondering. Time was running short, so I decided to attend the last week of school. While Steve, Sarah, and Andrew were off hanging out and doing what have you, I was in class. Every day I'd sit at a computer and type, all while trying to build up the courage to ask her out or talk to her or something. So it came to the second to last day of school. I was at a small gathering with my close friends, all of whom attended different schools. I was nervous. I turned to my big, non-straight friend for advice because, non-straight guys know women better than us straight males. Turns out stereotypes aren't true. Stereotypes are bad. He suggested that I pregame. Before school. Yes, he wanted me to take some drinks at home and take a couple of drinks before school. The sad part is I actually considered it.
Of course, I decided against it. There I was on the last day of school, journalism had already ended, and I was terrified. I proceeded to follow her around school for the entire day. Mind you, I still had a free period after journalism. I waited outside of her classroom and everything. I followed a respectable 24 feet, and every time she would turn around for some reason or another, I would disappear. I would vanish like a leaf in the wind. Wait, what? Several times I built up the courage to burst into a fast walk toward her with intent to ask her out, but at around 4 or 5 feet, I'd lose my vigor and circle around a bungalow and retreat back to my comfortable 24 feet. The day ended. I never asked her out. I regret that. I'm almost certain that I would have been rejected, but I still regret not talking to her. We're friends now. The end. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Anyways, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.